Somewhere outside Joplin, Missouri, a driver with 40 years and 4 million miles behind him walks across a dealer lot, past a row of long-nosed Peterbilts polished up under the lights, and signs the paperwork on a Volvo. The truck he traded in was a 2007 Peterbilt 379 with 1.5 million miles on it and nothing mechanically wrong with it. 10 years ago, he would have laughed at you for suggesting it. All across America right now, owner-operators and small fleet owners are making that same walk, turning their backs on the trucks their fathers drove and buying machinery that was designed in Sweden and Germany. However, this is not about patriotism, and it is not about betrayal. It is a fuel bill. Before we start the countdown, one thing has to be said out loud, because it changes how you hear everything that follows. There are two versions of the American trucking industry. There is the one painted on the mud flaps and stitched into the hats, where a Kenworth W900 rolling down Interstate 40 at sunset is the last honest piece of American iron. And then there is the one on the sales sheet, where the badge on the hood and the flag on the corporate headquarters stopped matching a very long time ago. And one more thing, because this channel does not sell you a story cleaner than the truth. The word millions in the title is doing some heavy lifting. There are about 3.5 million commercial drivers in America, and the overwhelming majority of them never buy a truck at all. They drive whatever the fleet hands them. The men actually making this decision are a much smaller group, owner-operators and small fleet buyers sitting in a dealer's finance office on a Tuesday afternoon with a bank appointment and a spreadsheet. But they are the ones who decide what everybody else is driving for the next 10 years. So watch what they buy. Some of what you are about to hear is going to sting. Some of it explains things you have been noticing at truck stops for years without being able to name. And number one is a policy written specifically to protect American trucks that ended up doing the exact opposite. Let's get rolling. Number 8. The licenses changed before the trucks did. Start with the part almost nobody outside the industry knows, because it is not a spec sheet argument. It is a legal one. When a new driver takes his commercial license road test in a truck with an automated transmission, the examiner stamps a restriction on his license. Not a suggestion, a restriction. That man is not legally allowed to operate a truck with a manual gearbox, and the only way to remove it is to go back and test again in a truck almost nobody at a training school owns anymore. Now look at where new drivers come from. The big carriers run automated fleets. The training schools run whatever the carriers run, and so year after year a larger share of the men coming into this industry walk out of the testing yard, legally locked out of the trucks that built it. Ask a recruiter in Springfield or Fort Smith how many applicants under 30 can legally drive an 18 speed, and watch his face change. Then think about what that means for a man with a paid-off Kenworth W900 sitting in his driveway who is trying to retire and hand it to somebody. He can sell it, he can rebuild it. He can polish it in the barn until the chrome throws his own face back at him. What he cannot do is find a 26-year-old with the license to legally drive it out of the yard. The trucks did not just change. The paperwork changed underneath them, and it happened without a single announcement anybody remembers hearing. That restriction did not appear out of nowhere. It came from a decision made in boardrooms about which transmission would be standard equipment, and to understand who was sitting in those boardrooms, you have to look at who actually owns these companies. Number 7. The badge on the hood already says Europe. Freightliner is the single best-selling heavy truck brand in the United States, the one you see pulling reefers on Interstate 80 more than any other. It has not been an American company since 1981. That is the year Daimler-Benz bought it out of Portland, Oregon. Western Star belongs to the same German parent. Mack Trucks, the bulldog on the hood, the truck that built the Pennsylvania Turnpike, was sold to Volvo of Sweden in the year 2000. Walk through the Macungie, Pennsylvania assembly plant today, and you are watching American workers on an American line, building trucks for a board of directors in Gothenburg. And International, formerly Navistar, the company that started as McCormick's farm equipment business in Chicago, finished passing into the hands of Traton in 2021. Traton belongs to the Volkswagen Group. Now, if you think that is just a logo on a letterhead, wait until you see what it adds up to on the sales floor. In 2025, Freightliner alone sold more than 73,000 new Class 8 trucks in the United States. International took about 11% of the market. Volvo and Mack together took another 17 or 18. Stack Freightliner, Western Star, Volvo, Mack, and International on one side of the table, and roughly 2 out of every 3 heavy trucks sold in this country came from a European-owned company. On the other side sits PACCAR, headquartered in Bellevue, Washington, the parent of Peterbilt and Kenworth, and the last major American-owned truck maker standing. Peterbilt finished 2025 at a little over 15% of the market. Kenworth finished at almost exactly the same number. Together, the two most beloved nameplates in American trucking hold about 30% of their own home market. So before we talk about a single driver rejecting a single truck, understand the field they are choosing on. The choice between American and European was mostly settled in boardrooms decades ago. What is happening now is drivers finding out what that ownership actually bought them. And what it bought them starts under the hood. Number 6. The engine came out of Sweden and gets built in Alabama. Ask a veteran driver what killed his faith in modern diesels, and you will get one answer before you finish the question. Emissions equipment. Specifically exhaust gas recirculation, the system that takes hot exhaust and feeds it back into the engine to cool the combustion. Drivers watched EGR coolers crack. They watched intake valves carbon up. They watched regeneration cycles strand loaded trucks on the shoulder in Wyoming, with the hazards blinking, and they watched a whole generation of engines get harder to trust. Navistar's own MaxForce program went all in on EGR and very nearly took the company down with it. Then something interesting happened, and it happened 4,000 miles away, where nobody in this country was watching. Scania in Sweden went the other direction entirely to meet European emission standards. No exhaust gas recirculation at all. Instead, they leaned on selective catalytic reduction, the after-treatment side, the diesel exhaust fluid side. Let the engine burn clean and hot the way an engine wants to burn, and clean up the nitrogen oxides downstream. One of their engineers put the philosophy about as plainly as it can be put. Let an engine be an engine. In 2017, engineering teams from International, Scania, and the German builder MAN sat down together and spent 5 years and billions of dollars building a heavy-duty powertrain around that idea. In Europe, it is sold as the Scania Super. In North America, it wears an international badge and is called the S13 Integrated. It is roughly 85% the same machine, the differences mostly coming down to fitting a European cabover versus an American conventional. It is assembled in Huntsville, Alabama, by American workers on an American line. And in head-to-head testing against the Freightliner Cascadia with the DD15, the Kenworth T680 with the MX13, and the Volvo VNL 760 with the D13, the S13 came in at least 5% more fuel efficient. Some fleets running demo units on real freight have reported better than that. 5% does not sound like a revolution. In this business, 5% is the entire argument. Now, the honest objection, and it is a real one, a Swedish-designed engine, assembled in an Alabama plant, still means proprietary diagnostics, dealer-only software, and a service network that in some parts of this country is thinner than the PACCAR network a driver has leaned on for 30 years. Break down outside Miles City, Montana on a Sunday, and the nearest shop that can actually talk to your truck matters a great deal more than 5% on a spec sheet. Drivers know this in their bones. It is the strongest argument left for buying American, and it is exactly why a lot of small Mountain West fleets have not moved an inch. But the dealer map fills in a little more every year, and that argument gets a little weaker every time a new bay opens. And those 5 percentage points do something specific to a man's bank account. Number 5. The fuel bill stopped being an argument. Volvo spent 6 years and rebuilt the V&L from the frame up. The new truck is 90% new parts, with a curved windshield, a completely reshaped roofline, and door mirrors designed to peel air off the cab instead of catching it. Volvo's own claim is up to 10% better fuel economy than the old V&L. 7 of those points come from aerodynamics alone. The other 3 come from the powertrain. Now put that in driver money. Volvo's product people did the math out loud. A long-haul operator running 100,000 miles a year, with fuel eating more than 20% of everything he spends, saves in the neighborhood of $5,000 per truck per year. For a fleet of 30, that is $150,000 that never leaves the account. For one owner-operator sitting at a pilot outside Amarillo doing his quarterly numbers on his phone, $5,000 is the difference between a good year and a year he does not want to talk about. Remember that $379 outside Joplin, that truck was paid off. No note, no payment, nothing owed on it. 1.5 million miles and still running straight. And it was still costing that man something close to $5,000 a year just to keep in the fleet. In diesel, he would not have burned in the truck parked next to it. That is the number he could not argue his way around, and neither can anybody else. And this is the part that stings for anyone who loves a long hood. Aerodynamics is where the classic American truck is structurally, permanently beaten. A Peterbilt 389 or a Kenworth W900 is a gorgeous object. Chrome stacks, long nose, squared-off mirrors, a shape that says something about the man driving it. It is also, from a wind tunnel's point of view, a brick with a hood ornament. Europe never developed that shape because European length laws never allowed it, so their engineers spent 40 years obsessing over drag instead of over presence. When diesel is expensive, drag wins, every single time. The engine and the fuel are the cold arguments. This next one is the argument that starts fights. Number 4. They took the stick shift away, and Europe is the reason. Volvo put a transmission called the I-shift into European trucks at the start of the 2000s. It is an automated manual, which is not the same thing as an automatic. There is still a clutch, and there is still a real gearbox. A computer just works them faster and more consistently than a human ever will. Detroit answered with the DT12. Mack has the MD drive. Eaton built the Endurant. And today, the overwhelming majority of new Class 8 trucks ordered in the United States leave the factory with 2 pedals. For a driver who spent 30 years floating gears in an 18-speed, this is the single hardest change to swallow. And the objection is not vanity. It is skill. Knowing how to bring a loaded truck down Cabbage Hill on Interstate 84 in the right gear. Knowing what the engine is telling you through the shifter. Knowing how to rock out of a muddy Iowa grain lot without cooking a clutch. That was craft. It took years to build and it could not be faked. And a piece of software now does most of it. Here is the uncomfortable part, and plenty of you are already arguing with your screen. The software is better at the fuel economy piece. Not better at everything. Not better on ice. Not better in a rutted log landing, where a good driver still beats it every time. But over 1 million highway miles, put a driver with 15 years in the seat against a modern automated manual, and the computer shifts at the right revolutions on every single pull, and never gets tired at 2 in the morning, outside Elko, Nevada. When a fleet is chasing that 5 and 10% tired human variation, is a line item on a spreadsheet. Now go back to that license restriction from number 8, and the whole thing closes into a circle. The manufacturers went automated. The carriers followed. The schools followed the carriers. And the licensing rules simply recorded what had already happened. Nobody set out to kill the manual gearbox. It just stopped being the thing anybody was trained on. If you learned to drive on a manual, tell me in the comments what you were sitting in when you learned. I want to see how many of those trucks are still out there. And if you are still riding along with this one, hit subscribe. This channel digs into trucking, highways, and American manufacturing every single week. Number 3, and this is the reason the drivers themselves give when nobody from the office is listening. Number 3, the Europeans spent 40 years designing the bunk. Go back to the early 1980s. Federal length rules in the United States changed, and overall combination length stopped being the thing that mattered. Overnight, the cab-over made no sense here, and American manufacturers ran toward the long hood conventional as fast as they could design one. In Europe, length limits stayed tight, so the cab-over never died. Every Scania, every Volvo FH, every Mercedes Actros climbing a pass in the Alps is still a cab sitting directly on top of an engine. That sounds like a disadvantage. It was actually 40 extra years of forced engineering on the one thing American manufacturers treated as an afterthought, which is the space where a human being actually lives. When your entire cab has to be a livable box, you get obsessive about flat floors, about noise insulation, about where a man puts his coffee, about how a bunk is mounted so road vibration does not travel up into his spine at 3 in the morning. That knowledge came across the Atlantic with the ownership. Climb into the sleeper of a new Volvo VNL and you get a bunk you can adjust, real climate control, and a cab quiet enough that a driver notices it inside the first 10 miles. Look at what Freightliner did with the Cascadia's living space. These are not gimmicks. They are the result of decades of European design work that Detroit and Bellevue were simply not doing. Because in America, the sleeper was a box you bolted on behind the seat. And underneath the comfort, there is a hard business number. Turnover at the biggest truckload carriers in this country has run close to 90% in bad years. A fleet manager who replaces nearly his whole roster every 12 months is burning enormous money on recruiting, orientation, and training. When a truck with a genuinely better bunk keeps a driver 8 months longer, the safety director and the accountant end up on the same side of an argument for once. The comfortable truck wins the bid. That is the case on paper. The purchase orders say the same thing. Number 2. The scoreboard moved in the first quarter of 2026. Sales numbers do not care about anybody's feelings, and the registration data coming out of the first 3 months of 2026 tells the story cleanly. Freightliner, still the biggest seller in America by a wide margin, saw its share of the Class 8 market slide to roughly 33%, several points below where it finished 2025. That sounds like bad news for the European side until you see where those trucks went instead. The biggest share gainers in that quarter were Volvo, and Volvo owned Mack. Mack picked up nearly 2 points of the market. Volvo picked up more than a point on the strength of the new VNL. Kenworth clawed back a fraction. And all of this is happening in a freight market that has been genuinely brutal, where total sales fell hard through 2025, where carriers were parking equipment in the back row instead of buying it, and where November of 2025 was the worst November for heavy truck sales since the Great Recession. That matters more than it sounds. In a boom, everybody sells trucks, and the numbers tell you nothing. In a bad market, when a small fleet owner gets one shot at a purchase and cannot afford to be wrong, what he buys is the purest signal you will ever get about what he actually believes will make him money. In the worst freight market in 15 years, the trucks gaining ground carry Swedish and German parentage. You can see the same split on the used side. Walk a wholesale lot in Ohio or a trade row outside Dallas and count what the big carriers are cycling out and what the second and third owners are chasing. Late model Cascadias and VNLs move on price and fuel numbers, quickly and unsentimentally. The long hood classics move on emotion to buyers who want that specific truck and will pay a premium to get it. 2 completely different markets, running side by side for the exact same job. Only one of them is growing. Nobody voted on any of this. It happened one bank appointment at a time. Which brings us to the one thing that was supposed to reverse all of it, and did not. Number 1. The tariff that was written to save American trucks. On October 17th of 2025, A presidential proclamation invoked Section 232 of the Trade Expansion Act, and on November 1st, the tariffs took effect. 25% on imported medium and heavy-duty trucks, Class 3 through 8. 25% on the parts as well, and that word covers engines, transmissions, tires, and chassis. 10% on buses. The stated reasoning was national security and rebuilding domestic manufacturing capacity, and the supporting figure was blunt. Imports had grown to roughly 43% of trucks sold in the United States. On paper, that is the American truck's rescue. Then somebody went and looked at where these trucks are actually built. Freightliner assembles the Cascadia in Cleveland, North Carolina. Volvo builds the VNL in Dublin, Virginia. Mack builds in Macungie, Pennsylvania. International's S13 engine comes off the line in Huntsville, Alabama. The European-owned companies have been assembling in American plants with American workers for decades, and the proclamation itself includes an offset for manufacturers who assemble here, worth 3.75% of the value of the trucks they build in the United States, running all the way out to 2030. European and Japanese truck and engine parts came in at a 15% all-inclusive rate rather than the full 25%. Meanwhile, the parts tariff landed on everybody. Every manufacturer in North America, Packer included, buys castings, electronics, and components across borders. When the cost of a new truck goes up across the board, brand loyalty is the first thing a buyer stops paying for. A man who was going to stretch for a Peterbilt because his father drove one starts looking hard at cost per mile instead. And cost per mile is exactly the argument the European engineering wins. There is one more wrinkle, and it is the one nobody saw coming. The tariff exempts trucks built more than 25 years ago, which means the pre-emissions iron, the old Kenworths and Peterbilts drivers have been hoarding in barns and rebuilding on weekends, got quietly protected. The oldest American trucks are safe, the new ones are not. Look across all 8 of these and one pattern runs through every single one. Nobody rejected American trucks. There was no boycott and nobody picketed a gate. American ownership of this industry was sold off between 1981 and 2021 while everyone was busy driving, and what is happening in 2026 is simply the bill arriving. Every buyer doing his own math in a dealer's finance office, weighing a truck payment against a fuel bill against how his back is going to feel at 65, keeps arriving at the same answer. But here is what the spreadsheet cannot put a number on. Packer still holds close to a third of this market, with 2 brands that hold their value better than anything else on the road. A well-kept Peterbilt 389 will still bring real money on a lot in Ohio when a 10-year-old Aero truck is worth scrap. Those men know exactly what the fuel numbers say, and they are buying anyway, because they are buying something the wind tunnel never measured, and the accountant never learned how to price. The American truck did not lose because it was worse. It lost because it was built to be looked at, in an industry that stopped paying for that a long time ago. And there are still a few thousand men out there paying for it themselves, out of their own pocket, every time they fill the tanks. That is not stubbornness. That is somebody deciding what his work is supposed to look like. If you rode shotgun for this one, subscribe for more from the world of trucking and American manufacturing. And if you want to know which cities the drivers in these trucks refuse to run into at any price, watch our video on the 10 cities American truckers will not touch in 2026 next. Keep the shiny side up, watch your fuel numbers, and we will see you down the road.